Welcome to this week's Puncty Bite and the week of January the 30th. I wanted to say thank you to all of you for making the first full week, I guess, of labs really successful. And I was just really excited to see all of the effort that you put into being prepared. And for some of you, congratulations on giving your very first lecture ever. And I feel like a lot of you did an excellent job with that and already have begun to learn things just through that first experience. I thought that it was a very good time then to share with you some pointers that I have for delivering a lecture. And if you want a copy of this, just let me know. I'm going to pull it over and talk just a little bit about some of the things that I've found to be helpful and effective when giving a lecture. And I know for some of you returning TAs, this is old hat and you've already heard it before, but bear with me a little bit. So in terms of delivering an effective lecture, there's a couple of, sort of standbys that I have come up with to share with you. So prepare by learning the content, but also do a bit of your own research. So this can be really important because if you do some background research on your own, you have all of a sudden this sort of personal connection with the material, and you get stoked to share with your students what you've discovered. So it can be really a very effective means of communicating something new to your students and also getting them excited. Memorize, this is a hard one, so it can be very difficult to try to memorize what it is you want to talk about, but a lot of times that distraction of shuffling through a lot of notes can just really interrupt the flow of the lecture. So it's something that, with time, I know that you can't always memorize everything, but it's a great thing to strive for, and you'll find that the more you're able to do that, the more the flow of the lecture really goes well. Try to make the lecture kind of like a personal conversation. So, if you really look at people and you try to bring them into the lecture, you pretend like you're having a conversation with each individual person in the room. There's nothing like it when you look around and every single set of eyes are there. You've got 100% engagement. It's probably one of my favorite things in the whole world, those moments. So try to make those personal connections with each student through eye contact. That's the best way to do that. Relate your lecture to something that you do, or maybe to something that your students do. So if it's something you're invested in, it comes through in your lecture. It adds enthusiasm to it. But even more so if you can relate to something your students love. So finding out something about them and saying, hey, Jeff, you might be interested in this because I know you happen to be interested in, environmental bioremediation. So it's really a great way to engage your students by relating to them. That's really a student-centered sort of pedagogy. Be present, and I was actually complimenting a couple of you on that and giving your first lectures and actually being very present. I think that we've all had very intelligent lecturers talk to us, but their mind was clearly somewhere else, and that makes for a poor lecture. So be present when you're giving your conversation, and make sure that you're thinking about what you're saying as you're saying it. Pay attention to the vibes that you get from your students. So try to fill your classroom. You can tell a lot by what your students are doing. Are they looking stressed? Are they looking bored, right? Are they falling asleep? Are they falling off of their chairs? No, you can tell a lot by just kind of getting that vibe that they're giving you. So pay attention to what their body language is telling you. It really tells you so much, and it does though require you to look at them and to be engaged with them. Be aware of your own nervous behaviors. Do you hold on to the edge of the bench and rock back and forth? Do you say a lot? And I know some of you, even on your very first day giving a lecture, picked up on some of your habits. Once you've identified them, you can do a good job of trying to not necessarily eliminate them, but trying to make them less distracting to the lecture. I have a habit of saying cool a lot in my lectures, and so that's something that I think about, and I don't stop saying cool, but I try to make it minimal enough that it's not a distracting part of what I'm saying. slow down. I have told some of you this right before you gave your first lecture. I've rarely seen a lecture that was too slow. Now, I mean, I'm sure you could put that to the test, but I think for the most part, we forget that the students are writing and seeing all of this for the very first time. So it's hard to go too slowly. And then, maybe last but not least, interlace your own personality into the lecture. And this can be like, not everyone is like me, so I have a lot of enthusiasm when I lecture, and I tend to bounce around a little bit. I tend to be sometimes a little bit crazy when I get going, and not everyone works that way. Some people interlace their personality by having a very dry sense of humor. I've seen that done very effectively. So it's about bringing yourself to the table, and I think I missed one there. Study not only the content of the lecture, but also its flow. And that's important. I actually will sometimes spend as much time studying the flow of a lecture than as I will the content. That is to say, knowing what comes next and how you're going to smoothly move from one component of the lecture to another. All right, well, let me know if you would like a copy of this at all, and I'll send it your way. I know some of you already have it. Thanks for bearing with me again as we go through these sort of pointers for delivering a successful lecture. Let's look really quickly at the schedule of upcoming events for this week. We are headed into the last week of January. In fact, we're headed into the first week, partial week of February. So just taking a look, we will be doing, for most of you, Lab 4 tomorrow, though Craig and Katie will go on to Lab 5 on Tuesday. So we'll talk a little bit about both. Do take note that the first general micro lecture exam is on the 31st, so I will be around all day helping to proctor that exam, and some of you I know will be helping me grade the exam. And if anybody is interested in earning a little bit of extra money and you want to help me proctor or something along those lines, just let me know. I don't mind a short break in the evening if anyone is up for that. So let's also look towards the first week, partial week of February here, and I want to point out open lab coverage is going to be Craig and Katie. So this will be your Friday to get that lab covered, whether it be that you're there or that someone else is there for you. That's totally fine. So it's your Friday. Lab 5 will be on most labs. We'll do that on Wednesday and Thursday, though Craig and Katie will do Lab 6 on Thursday. Don't forget to start getting signed up for those lectures if you have not already done so. And then with respect to 5, and I'll talk about this in a minute, we may very well share that lecture. So I may do part of that even if you're signed up for it, unless you're a very experienced TA and you're comfortable with the board work that goes along with that demonstration of dilution problems. Then let me know and I'll jump in and do at least part of lecture 5. Okay, so let's take a look at the TA guidelines for Lab 4. This is a review as we went through a bit of this last time. But a quick reminder for those of you doing Lab 4 tomorrow or the next day, please do remember that we will be doing the capsule stain before we get into the full lecture. So if we could get that done, just a light smear of the milk culture so that it has time to dry throughout the introductory lecture, it really helps those stains come out a lot better. So we'll try to do that. The other thing is to try to remember to remind your students to get ready for Lab 5 ahead of time, because we will be doing dilution problems that day, and that's by far the as you all know, the most difficult part of micro for many students. So it's a good time to have them plan to review ahead of time before they get going on Lab 5. Okay, so the other thing going on Lab 4 day, whether that will be Monday or Tuesday for you, is that we do need to assign the unknown press release. And what we've decided to do with that, and let me bring up the calendar for this. What we'd like to do is actually have that be due on Thursday the 9th or Wednesday the 8th, so that they don't have more than one thing due in a week. I think that's going to work out quite well. So that'll mean that the dilution problems will be due on either the 15th or the 16th, and that'll give them one thing each week as we head into sort of the midst of the semester. So that's the crux of it on Lab 4, and we'll go ahead and talk briefly about Lab 5. Again, having the students read that ahead of time is a really good idea, and at some point during the day assigning those dilution problems. We will give extra credit as usual for the Winogradsky column, so we might want to remind the students during Lab 5 that when it gets to Lab 7, we want to have them bring the mud and water for a Winogradsky column. I really need your help remembering to assign this and to remind students to bring the mud and water. Sometimes it's hard for me to remember to remind them about that, so if you can help me out with that, it would be way appreciated. I think I mentioned the dilution problem due date, and I mentioned very briefly, but I'll say again, this lecture is difficult. The first part of it is fairly straightforward, but the latter part where you're looking at the different methods for figuring dilution problems is a little bit harder. So as I said, we may want to split the lecture, so if you are signed up for Lab 5, unless you're a real senior TA, I think it might be best if we split that lecture so that I can help you out with introducing some of those more difficult concepts. Great. Also, during Lab 5, everybody needs to be ready to demonstrate aseptic culturing technique. You can talk amongst your co-TA, but we need to have somebody who is ready to do that. And I did want to make one note on those demos. Please do remember, unlike many other labs I have myself encountered, I take a lot of pains to keep those procedures up to date. So please do read the procedure in the lab manual so that you know what the students are reading in there, and they are up to date. I have made sure that those have been changed, so if there's anything, that what you see is what you get. You don't need to look for changes to that procedure, so that would be great. And then finally, Lab 6, and I know this is only pertinent for Craig and Katie this week, but I will just make a quick note on Lab 6. Couple of little things. This is the Environmental Influences Lab, and at the beginning, there's my cat, that's Cal. So at the very beginning of this, you're going to need to make sure that the students get their data summarized from the dilution problems so that we have the tables up on the board, and we make sure to kind of understand what was going on with all of the work with the dilution problems. We really need to follow up on that with the students, make sure that they understand it, and that's why I have them recorded on the board, not because I necessarily want all of that data summarized, but because if we ask them to record it, they're just a lot more likely to go through the problem and understand the problem. So we'll be patient with them and help them do that. The other thing is that this is, yes, the tea streaking day. So the day we've all been waiting for, you get to go streaking and teach your students how to go streaking. So if you would all be ready, please, to demonstrate the streak technique. I know that's probably not too much of a burden, but we'll look forward to it. Okay, I think that is everything that I have today. I'm rechecking my own notes, but I think that sounds great, and I look forward to seeing all of you this week, and I'm sorry for the bit of tardiness for the Puncty Bite today. I just returned from the ski race in Grand Mesa, which is outside of Grand Junction, and it's a long drive, long returning drive. All right, have a fantastic evening, and I can't wait to see you all.